Hey guys, today's story is a little different. It doesn't start with fireworks or ultimatums or slammed doors, starts with silence. A kind of quiet rejection that's almost invisible to everyone else, except to the one who feels it in their gut. That was me. My name is Dean. I'm 41 years old. I run a mid-sized hospitality consulting firm that's helped open more than a dozen five-star restaurants across the country. I've built a career around making others feel welcome, valued, seen. That's why what happened with my wife's family hit differently. Not just because I was excluded, but because I've made it my life's work to do the exact opposite. It was my mother-in-law's 70th birthday dinner. A tight, family-only celebration, my wife said. When I asked about the details, she hesitated. "It's nothing big," she mumbled, fiddling with her phone. That hesitation told me everything. I wasn't invited. Not by mistake. Not due to limited space. But by design. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. And hey, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and if someone's ever tried to make you feel like you don't belong in your own story. Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. It started with my daughter, Mia. She's 15, sharp, observant, and honest to a fault. That morning, I dropped her off at school and she hesitated before getting out. "Dad," she said, "Grandma said I'm not allowed to mention the dinner to you." She looked uncomfortable, like just saying it felt like betrayal. I kept my face still. "Thanks for telling me," I said. Then she left. And I sat there in the car, hands on the wheel, heart like a stone. I knew something was coming, but hearing it aloud made it real. My wife, Lisa, hadn't said a word. Just days before, she told me it would be a low-key dinner with her mom's sisters. No husbands, no plus ones. But clearly, Mia knew otherwise. And if Mia knew, that meant the whole family knew. They just didn't think I needed to. Here's the thing, I've never had a blow-up with my mother-in-law. No screaming matches, no scandals, no big moments of disrespect. It was death by 1,000 cuts. The comments about my blue-collar background, even though I now make more than everyone in that family combined. The passive-aggressive jabs about my taste, my upbringing, the way I speak. I laughed it off for years. Kept my chin up. For Lisa. For Mia. But this being deliberately excluded from a milestone dinner wasn't just rude. It was strategic. It said, "You're not one of us. You never were." By noon that day, I knew I wasn't going to sit at home pretending not to care. I've built entire restaurants from empty shells. I've trained chefs who now hold Michelin stars. The irony? One of those chefs, Marco, is now head of the exact restaurant they'd booked for the dinner. A high-end fusion spot, reservation only, with a 2-month wait list. Unless you knew someone. Unless you'd helped build the place from scratch. I called Marco around 1 p.m. "Dean," he said. "Haven't seen you in a minute." I told him the truth, left out the drama, kept it classy. "I'd like a table for tonight." Something quiet, private. He didn't hesitate. "For you?" "Anything. Leave the rest to me." That evening, I dressed with care. Not flashy. Just sharp. Clean. I told Lisa I had a late client dinner, let her sit with that. Didn't lie. Just gave her what she gave me, the appearance of respect. But I wasn't interested in confrontation. I wasn't walking in to start a scene. I wanted something deeper. I wanted presence. I wanted poise. I wanted the room to see what dignity looks like when it's been tested and chooses silence instead of noise. I arrived 10 minutes after their party was seated. I didn't need to sneak, I walked right through the front entrance. The host saw me and his face lit up. "Mr. Devereaux. Right this way." His voice carried just enough. A few heads turned. And that's when I saw them, Lisa, her mom, her sisters, even Lisa's cousin and her husband. All there. All eating. Laughing. Not a single empty seat. My mother-in-law turned pale. Lisa blinked like she'd seen a ghost. But I didn't stop walking. The host led me to a table on the opposite side of the restaurant, secluded, with a view of the skyline. A bottle of wine was already waiting. Chilled. My favorite. Marco appeared moments later in full chef's attire. "Good to see you, chef," he said, using the title I haven't claimed in years. I nodded, said nothing. Let the gesture speak for me. As I sat, I caught Mia's eyes. She was the only one at that table who smiled. Small. Secret. Like she knew I wasn't there to make noise, I was there to make memory. I ordered with intention. The server didn't bring a menu. Marco already knew. Each dish that arrived was a silent testament to every late night, every 20-hour shift, every time I made someone else look good and never asked for credit. This dinner was mine. I hadn't just earned it. I had built the building it stood in. No one came over to speak to me. No apologies. No explanations. That was fine. I wasn't looking for validation. Just the truth, and I had found it, plated beautifully and served with dignity. I didn't glance back once. Not because I wasn't curious. I just knew that turning around would make it about them again. And this wasn't about them anymore. It was about reclaiming something they tried to quietly erase in me: presence, my worth, my space at the table. And somehow, it felt more powerful to stay in my corner, letting my existence be the echo that disturbed their celebration. Letting the elegance of my silence carry more weight than any confrontation ever could. As I picked through the first Cushion oyster trio with ginger foam, just the way I liked it, I thought about all the times I'd tried to fit in with them. The holidays where I overextended myself, the gifts that were barely acknowledged, the endless attempts to learn their customs, inside jokes, their version of propriety. I'd spent years trying to be acceptable, digestible, palatable. For what? So I could be quietly edited out of their story when it was convenient. Halfway through the meal, Marco came over again, this time with a small smile. The table by the fireplace just asked if you're the guy from the magazine piece, he said softly. I chuckled. Tell them it depends which one. We shared a quiet laugh. That was another thing they never quite grasped. While they were busy positioning themselves at the top of their small social circles, I was out building something real. Something lasting. My work had been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, even a cover on a hospitality quarterly. I'd helped revitalize dining districts, consulted for high-end resorts. My network spanned continents, not neighborhoods. But to them, I was just Lisa's husband. The man from humble beginnings who got lucky. Funny how luck looks a lot like discipline when you zoom in. Dessert came in the form of a tasting board, 6 small plates, each curated around milestones in my career. Marco knew the story behind each dish. And that's what made it more than food. It was a narrative. A quiet biography, told through flavor. As I took a bite of the espresso semifreddo, I remembered a winter night when I was still working the line at a cramped bistro in Boston. I had burned both hands plating risotto. But I finished service. Never told a soul. Just taped up my palms and kept going. Those moments were mine. The world didn't applaud them. My wife's family certainly never saw them. But that night, in that room, I honored them. Eventually, I stood. Paid the check myself generously. Not for show. For the staff. For Marco. For the journey. I walked out with the same calm I walked in with. But as I passed their table on the way to the door, I let my eyes brush across theirs. Just once. Just long enough to let them feel it. The realization that I hadn't come to beg or to make a scene. I had come to remind them that I was never beneath them. They had just never looked high enough. Lisa texted later that night. One line. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I wasn't angry. I was tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of being courteous while getting cut. Of playing along to keep the peace. Of holding your tongue while others wield theirs like knives. I slept well that night. Not because anything had been resolved. But because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was apologizing for existing. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee and watched the sun burn through a slow fog. And I thought about Mia. About the way she looked at me across that restaurant. Like she saw the whole picture. Not just her dad being excluded, but her dad choosing dignity over drama. I hope that moment planted something in her. That knowing your worth doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's a quiet seat at the table you built yourself. Sometimes it's a full-course meal served across the room from the people who never thought you deserved a chair. Later that week, I found out through a mutual friend that Lisa's mother had referred to me as childish for showing up. Said I was trying to make a statement. And she was right, just not in the way she meant. I wasn't performing. I was revealing. Her. Them. Me. The contrast was the statement. All I had to do was show up with grace, and the imbalance showed itself. Mia came home from school that Friday and handed me a note. It was folded twice, with careful creases. I opened it. Just 4 words in her handwriting. Thank you for going. I didn't cry. I just nodded. And she nodded back. No more needed to be said. Because some messages are loudest in the silence that follows. A few days passed in quiet rhythm, the kind that settles in your bones when something has finally snapped into place. I wasn't thinking about Lisa's family, not actively. I wasn't plotting a dramatic comeback or scrolling through old messages, dissecting past conversations for missed red flags. I was just moving forward. And sometimes, that's the scariest thing you can do to someone who's always underestimated you. Move on without needing them to notice. But people notice. They always do when you stop trying. On the 4th day, I got a message from Lisa's cousin Thomas. Heard about the restaurant. Honestly? That was badass. I smiled faintly. Then another message came through, this time from Lisa's sister. Sorry about how things went. Mom can be old school. That one I didn't answer. Not out of malice. Just preservation. I wasn't interested in peeling back the band-aid just to see if the wound was still bleeding. Lisa finally showed up that weekend. She came by to pick up Mia, but lingered on the porch longer than usual. You really didn't tell me you knew the chef, she said. I shrugged. Didn't think it mattered. She bit her lip. I didn't know they'd treat you like that. That part almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was such a familiar deflection. I said nothing. Let the silence hold the weight. She looked at me like she wanted to reach across it, then didn't. You looked really good that night, she added softly. I nodded once. I felt like myself. That was the real truth. I hadn't felt like someone's plus one. I hadn't been waiting for permission to exist. I'd just been me, unfiltered, unedited, and uninvited. And still, fully present. That night I made dinner for Mia and me. Just something simple: pasta arrabbiata, crusty bread, and a side salad. But she sat there beaming like we were at a 5-star restaurant. Dad, she said, mouth half full of spaghetti, do you think Grandma will ever like you? I paused, set my fork down. I don't think it's about like or dislike, sweetheart. Some people only value what they can control. And when they can't control you, they don't know where to put you. She looked puzzled. That's weird. I laughed gently. Yeah. It is. The next week, I had a meeting with a new investor group. I'd been expanding one of my boutique restaurant concepts to Miami, and interest was high. I walked into that conference room feeling steady, not just because of the numbers in my pitch deck, but because I finally understood something I hadn't before. You can't build empires and beg for validation at the same time. One undermines the other. I pitched the concept cleanly, confidently, and when the lead partner stood to shake my hand at the end, I didn't need to text anyone to celebrate. I didn't need to forward the confirmation email to someone who had once dismissed me. The win was internal. But that night, when I toasted a glass of bourbon alone on my balcony, I raised it slightly toward the horizon and whispered, for every room I wasn't welcome in. Things shifted subtly after that. Lisa started texting more, checking in. Mia mentioned that her grandparents were acting weird, suddenly asking about my work, wondering what I'd been up to. I didn't engage. I wasn't trying to convert them, impress them, or outmaneuver them. I had nothing to prove. And that, I think, is what made them start noticing. People like that are allergic to indifference. They feast on reaction. But I wasn't giving them a single drop. 2 weeks later, Lisa invited me to another family function, her father's retirement dinner. "They'd like you to come," she said carefully. I looked at her for a long beat. "Or you'd like me to come?" She hesitated. "Both." I turned that over in my mind. Not to hold it over her, but to measure it properly. Not long ago, I wasn't allowed at the same restaurant as them. And now? Now they were inviting me back into the fold? I smiled faintly. "I'll think about it." And I meant it. Mia saw the invitation sitting unopened on the counter the next day. "You're not going?" she asked. "I haven't decided. But don't you want to show them how cool you are?" I pulled her into a hug. "I don't need to show them. You already know." And that was the shift. That was the real win. That she knew. That I had stopped explaining my worth to people who would never listen, and started modeling it for someone who was still learning. Every quiet dinner. Every composed decision. Every time I chose peace over pettiness, I was teaching her what self-respect actually looks like. A week later, I declined the dinner. Politely. No spectacle. Just a clean RSVP. "Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. Wishing you all the best for the celebration." No explanation. No rebuttal. Just a closed door left ajar. The message was clear: you don't get to discard someone and expect applause when you try to pull them back in. Respect is not transactional. It's cumulative. And as I watched Mia pack for a weekend trip with her mom, she turned at the door and asked, "Can I tell them you said hi?" I smiled gently. "Only if you want to." She nodded. "I think I will." And I let her. Because it was never about revenge. It was about legacy. And I'd already rewritten mine. The funny thing about being underestimated is that it's often wrapped in politeness. That retirement dinner I'd declined? Turns out they went ahead and left a seat open for me anyway. Lisa sent a picture of the place card, still sitting untouched between her father and uncle. "We miss you," the message read. I stared at it for a moment. Not with smugness. Not with regret. Just a long, measured breath. They weren't missing me. They were missing what they thought I could have been useful for now. Lisa stopped by 2 days later to return a jacket Mia had forgotten. She lingered in the doorway again. "You know," she started, eyes flicking to the edge of my kitchen counter. "Dad said it was a shame you didn't come. That he was looking forward to finally hearing about your company." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because, for 2 decades, not once had he ever asked. Now that articles were circulating, mentions popping up on national press releases, he was curious. I nodded slowly. "Maybe next time." Lisa smiled faintly, then said something that froze the room. "They asked me if we were still close." She let the word hang in the air, like it had suddenly lost its meaning. I looked at her. "What did you say?" Her eyes dropped to her hands. "I said we were figuring it out." But we weren't. Not really. What we were figuring out was how to co-parent with grace while slowly, painfully acknowledging the collapse of something that had been hollow for years. The more I rebuilt myself, the more visible the cracks between us became. Still, I didn't resent her. Not anymore. She had her own cage to break out of. I just wasn't going to sit in it with her anymore. Around this time, I got a call from an old friend, someone who had been watching from the sidelines, always believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. "I read that piece about your company's valuation," he said. 11 million, huh? That's not small potatoes." I smiled. "No, it's not," he chuckled. "You've come a long way from sleeping on couches." And just like that, the past slid into focus like a long-forgotten reel. The missed birthdays. The quiet sacrifices. The nights I worked through until dawn while Lisa's family joked about me needing a real job. This wasn't just success. It was vindication without the shouting. One evening, I took Mia out for dinner at just any place, but the chef's new pop-up location. When we walked in, he spotted me and raised 2 fingers like a salute. Mia's eyes widened. "They know you're here too?" I winked. Some people never forget who believed in them early. We sat down, ordered, and I watched her swirl her pasta like it was the most magical thing she'd ever tasted. Halfway through, she leaned in and whispered, "Mom said Grandma thinks you're being distant." I exhaled through my nose. "Do you think I am?" She thought hard. "You're calm. That's not distant. It's just like you're not mad anymore." I nodded. "That's because I'm not." Being mad kept me tied to them. I let go. And that's when it hit me. Letting go isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not the slammed door or the last word. It's in the quiet refusal to chase anymore. It's when you no longer bend yourself trying to be digestible. It's the calm that comes when you know who you are, and you stop needing a room full of skeptics to validate it. The next week, I got a letter in the mail. Actual letter, not a text or email. From Lisa's mother. I sat with it for a while before opening it. The handwriting was sharp, precise. Inside, an apology. Not warm. Not sweeping. But real. "I misjudged you," it read. "And I may not understand the world you've built, but I can see now that it's yours. I hope one day we can sit down and talk properly." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, but it didn't need a response. Not yet. Some things were meant to settle first. Some things take longer to rewire. Work was thriving. Press requests started flooding in, and I accepted a few selectively. Each time, I spoke not about revenge or validation, but about longevity. How you build something that lasts when no one claps for you. How silence teaches clarity. And how sometimes, when you're told you're just a family screw-up, that label becomes rocket fuel if you know how to burn it clean. Mia's school invited parents to speak at Career Week, and for the first time, I accepted. I stood before a room full of wide-eyed 10-year-olds and told them not just what I did, but why I started. "Sometimes," I said, "you have to create the space you weren't given. That's how you make sure someone else doesn't go through the same wall you had to crash through." Mia beamed from the front row. That look unfiltered pride from the one person who mattered most. It was better than every award I'd won combined. Later that night, as I cleaned up the living room and heard the soft hum of Mia asleep down the hall, I sat down with a whiskey and opened my calendar. A gala invitation glowed from the screen, a major event hosted by the same culinary network that once turned me down. This time, they were honoring me. I smiled quietly. Not because they were finally recognizing me, but because I no longer needed them to. I was going because I had something to give back now. Not a show of power. Just presence. Earned, not demanded. I arrived at the gala an hour early. Not out of nervousness, but because I knew the shape of the room. These weren't just chefs and investors anymore, they were media figures, influencers, quiet observers who watched numbers and trends like wolves on a cold scent. I'd walked into dozens of rooms like this before, but this time, I didn't walk in hungry. I walked in whole. Wearing a tailored charcoal suit and no tie, I took up space without announcing it. It's a strange feeling entering a room you used to dream about, only to realize the dream was never about them. It was always about you. They sat me at a table near the center. The placement was deliberate, respectful. On the card, my name was printed clearly beneath a silver crest. Not guest of, not +1. Just me. Across from me sat a woman who had once refused to take my calls back when I was trying to get featured on her blog. Tonight, she leaned forward and asked, "How did you manage to scale so quickly while staying so quiet?" I gave her a small smile. "By keeping the noise out." That line landed like a soft stone on still water, no splash, just ripples that spread. Later that evening, they played a video montage clips of my restaurants, articles, team photos. Then they introduced me. I didn't write a speech. I didn't need to. I walked up to the podium, looked out at the crowd, and let the silence sit for a few seconds. "They used to call me the screw-up," I said, and the room held its breath. But I wasn't failing. I was just learning in a language they didn't understand, A few people nodded. The lesson I want to leave you with tonight is simple. Sometimes, the best thing that ever happens to you is being doubted. Because doubt, when metabolized properly, becomes direction. Polite applause. A few claps turned into a standing ovation, not the kind whipped up by PR or pressure, but the kind that comes from people who recognize something real when it stands in front of them. I stepped down, nodded to the host, and slipped back to my table. Mia was watching the live stream from home with Lisa. I'd made sure she could. She sent a voice message afterward that simply said, "I'm proud of you, Dad." That was the only review I needed. The next day, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. It was Lisa's dad. I almost let it go to voicemail. But I didn't. "Hey," he said, his voice gruff, uncertain. "I saw the clip." "I didn't. I didn't know you'd come that far." I stayed quiet. He continued, "I said some things over the years. About you. To you. Maybe I didn't understand what you were trying to do." Another pause. "But I respect it now. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't reject it either." "Thanks," I said simply. "I appreciate the call." We hung up with no ceremony, no resolution. Just a faint shift in the air, like a door creaked open somewhere deep in the house. That evening, I walked to the local corner store. The owner had known me for years, watched me go from ramen budgets to restaurant launches. "Saw you on TV," he said with a grin. "Still driving that old truck?" I laughed. "Yeah, she's still holding together." He pointed a candy bar toward me. "Don't let success make you too shiny. We like you rough around the edges." That stuck with me. There's a kind of dignity in never forgetting where you started, because that's where your compass is buried. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows you learn to navigate alone. 1 week later, I got an invitation in the mail, not a gala this time. A family gathering. Lisa's mother had organized something for the holidays and included a note. "It wouldn't feel right without you and Mia." No pressure. Just family. That last word lingered. I showed Mia, who immediately started planning what to wear. "Can I help decorate cookies with Grandma?" I smiled. "If she lets you." Then I paused. "Do you want me there?" She looked at me like I'd asked if she wanted the sky to stay blue. "Of course I do." So I went. Not to prove anything. Not to test the temperature. But because sometimes, the best kind of revenge is peace. And peace, unlike revenge, isn't reactive. It's intentional. I walked into the house I'd once been asked to leave, carrying a tray of handmade pastries from my test kitchen. Lisa's mother greeted me at the door with a quiet nod. No apology. No theatrics. But she took the tray, thanked me, and asked if I wanted coffee. That was enough. The evening went by in a slow, surreal flow. I caught up with cousins I hadn't seen in years. Watched Mia laugh with her relatives. Took photos. Shared stories. Not once did I feel like I needed to shrink or puff up. I just was. Toward the end of the night, Lisa pulled me aside. "I know things haven't always been easy," she said. "But I'm glad you're here." I looked around at the twinkling lights, the soft music, the buzz of small talk. "Me too," I said. "But not for them. For her. Always for her." And that was the truth. Everything I'd built, every decision I'd made, every moment of restraint had all led back to making sure Mia had a life defined not by rejection, but by self-worth. The irony is, I had to reclaim my own worth to give her that gift. And somewhere along the way, the screw-up label fell away like dust in the wind. I thought walking into my restaurant as a guest for the first time would feel strange, like trying to shake hands with a reflection. But instead, it felt like a long exhale. Like I'd been holding my breath through years of expectations, small humiliations, and the sting of being underestimated. Now I breathed. Fully. The maitre d' greeted me with that same elegant nod I taught her back when we first opened. "Welcome home, Mr. Kim," she said, and for once, it didn't feel ironic. I wasn't on the clock. I wasn't balancing budgets or calming down a supplier. I was simply here to enjoy what I'd created. My table sat in the alcove overlooking the garden wall, where I'd insisted we install live herbs and a single, hand-lit lantern each night. A place of quiet elegance. Of choices. I chose a 9-course tasting menu, not out of vanity, but because I wanted to taste the dream I'd once described on a napkin. The staff moved like water, each detail executed without hesitation. A guest at a neighboring table leaned over and whispered, "You're the owner, right?" I've never had food that made me close my eyes before. I smiled, not with ego, but with a kind of gratitude that runs deep like the silence after a thunderstorm. Later that week, I received a message from a food critic. She'd been notoriously unkind when I was starting out, calling my concept ambitious but amateur. Her email this time was simple. "I owe you a public apology. May I write something that tells the full story?" I replied, "You can write whatever you like. The food will speak for itself." I meant it. I had nothing to prove. Not to her, not to them, not even to the version of myself that used to chase their approval like it was the only form of air. Still, karma doesn't always arrive with a trumpet. Sometimes it arrives with an invoice. A week after that email, I got a call from my old brother-in-law. He sounded hesitant, cautious. "Hey. So. I heard from Mom. She said you've got some big investors interested in expanding. She was wondering if you'd be open to partnering?" The pause was its own kind of confession. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline from my apartment window. "Tell her I appreciate the interest," I said. "But we're not looking to dilute the brand." There was a silence. "Right. Got it." Another pause. "You're doing well, man. I mean, really well." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks." Took a while. And then the kicker. She was wrong, you know. Calling you a lowlife. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some things lose their power when you don't repeat them. By spring, we had 3 restaurants in development. One in LA, one in Vancouver, and another in Tokyo. A year ago, I couldn't get my in-laws to let me sit at the adult table. Now I was consulting on design palettes in 3 time zones. I didn't announce any of it on social media. No press release. Just quiet, deliberate steps forward. The kind of movement that makes noise without a single word. That's the kind of legacy I wanted, not something that shouted, but something that lasted. Mia and I started taking Sundays off, completely off. No phones, no laptops. Just breakfast on the patio, then long walks through the city or movie marathons with commentary tracks. One Sunday, she turned to me during a late lunch and said, "I like you better like this." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She shrugged. "Not trying to win anything. Just you." That landed harder than I expected. Because she was right. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't defending or planning a counterattack. I was just building. For her. For me. For the life we both deserved. Then came the final loop, the full circle. One night, we got a reservation request at the restaurant. Under the name, Linda Tanaka, my mother-in-law. I stared at the name for a while. Then I called the manager and said, "Treat her like any other guest. No better. No worse." I didn't need to be there. And I wasn't. But I did ask for the security footage, not out of spite, but out of curiosity. She arrived with her bridge club. Dressed well, looking every bit the part she'd always played. They dined. They laughed. And then, as she stood to leave, she looked toward the chef's table. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the signature we carved into the wall, mine and Mia's initials, side by side, in brass. There was a flicker of recognition. And then she nodded. Once. Not to anyone. Just to herself. I never reached out after that. Never followed up. She didn't either. There are some bridges that shouldn't be burned, but neither should they be crossed again. Let them stand in silence, monuments to where we decided not to go. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten note from one of the investors who passed on me years ago. It simply said, "You built what we didn't believe was possible. You didn't just prove us wrong, You proved yourself right. That's rarer than gold in this business. Respect. I smiled, folded the letter, and slid it into my drawer. Not a trophy. Not a weapon. Just a reminder. Because that's the truth of it. Revenge isn't always fireworks. Sometimes, it's a reservation in your own name, at a place no one thought you could build. It's hearing your daughter say she's proud of you. It's walking into a room and no longer needing to take up space, because you are the room. That's the story. That's the closure. They say time heals, but what they don't say is that sometimes, time reveals. It peels back layers you didn't even know you were carrying, until all that's left is clarity. Not vengeance. Not victory. Just truth. When I look back now, I don't feel bitterness. I don't replay the slights or replay her words calling me a lowlife. I remember them, sure, but like distant thunder. Echoes, not threats. And echoes can't touch you when you're standing in the quiet of your own peace. Building the life I have now wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. That used to be the fuel. But fuel burns out. What lasts is purpose. I built for love. For self-respect. For the version of me that still remembers sleeping on a friend's couch, dreaming of something more while eating leftovers out of takeout containers. That man didn't want revenge. He wanted space to grow. He wanted dignity. And when I stopped chasing validation from those who couldn't see me, I finally started creating something that mattered. Mia's still with me. Stronger than ever. The restaurant hums like a living thing, thriving, beautiful, unbothered. And I've stopped checking the rearview mirror. I don't need to know who's watching, or regretting, or silently wishing they treated me better. That's their burden. Mine is lighter now. So if you're out there, feeling like the underdog, like the one they counted out, know this: you don't need their table. You can build your own. Bigger. Brighter. And when they come looking for a seat, you'll have the power to nod. And let them eat somewhere else.